Hi guys, today I want to talk a bit about working around a theme or a specific prompt for multiple pieces. Today I'm only working on one piece, but it is a theme for several. I love working with a theme like this where multiple pieces need to tie together and have some continuity to them and some connections with the way that they're executed so that they do fit within, again, that theme and that concept and that world. And I love being able to do this. I find it really very inspiring and challenging in a good way to be able to give myself certain restraints that I have to follow through with for several pieces. So, the project thing that I'm working on for this piece is for my Patreon postcard and package for March. So if you're interested, if you wanted to get a print of this, then you can go and check out my Patreon. There's a link down in the description, but this will go out as the postcard for March. So anyone signed up by the end of March will get this shipped out if you're in the $10 or up tier. But yeah, let's just jump in and talk about it. So this month I decided I wanted to create a poll for my patrons, or yes, my patrons over on Patreon, and the theme Haunted Fairies was the theme that won, which I was really excited about. This was the theme that I had the most starting off ideas for. So all of the artwork that's going to go in the package will fit within this theme, and I was really inspired by it. So some of the things that I like to specifically think about when I'm working on pieces that fit within a theme are the medium that I'm using, as well as colors and the story that's actually going to be told, as well as themes and elements. So basically, there's like a million different ways that you can tie different pieces together. But I personally prefer to have the pieces, if they're part of a theme of a set, to all be in the same medium. I find that right off the bat is something that really ties things together. This is something that often really isn't a problem, as a lot of us really just kind of focus on a couple mediums at most. But sometimes I'm slightly tempted when I'm thinking about doing sets of pieces to sometimes do some of them, say, digitally, and some of them in watercolor, which is totally fine. But I think that the cornerstone of a lot of my pieces fitting together is when they are within that same medium. So all the pieces that I'll be working on for the same will be in watercolors, and I want them to have a certain tie of how the colors look. So not necessarily that they have to follow the exact same color scheme. I think that that would be a little bit monotonous to work on anyways, but also to look at them. But there's a certain quality that they can have. So for this one, it is very cool toned. There's a fair amount, I should say, of grays and blacks, and it's kind of more on the desaturated side. So that is a theme that I want to continue through the other pieces, is that I want it to be cooler, and I want there to be a presence of this gray color, which eventually I'll get to painting the background. That's really where most of the gray is, and it's built up with Payne's gray, which is a very cool gray, so that will work perfectly for that. But yeah, those are two things that I think about when I'm thinking about how to plan these things out. But beyond the more face value elements that can really divide or unify pieces, I find that the thing that I love focusing on the most is the concept or the story behind the pieces. For me, those are the things that really give multiple pieces in a set a purpose, and gives it a reason why there's going to be more pieces, because that way each one that you look at, when you look at it all together, you get more information, more elements than you would when they're divided. And I think that that's such an exciting thing to think through and to plan out. So for Haunted Fairies, I knew right off the bat that I wanted to explore what haunted could mean, what I could portray with that. So for the postcard for this piece that I'm working on, I wanted to focus on a singular character and kind of her decline, as far as from a healthy living fairy to potentially a dead one that's cursed or will be a fairy that haunts others. So that was the spark for this piece, and then for the other piece that will be within this package that will be an 8x10 print, that will be one that explores the relationship between fairies that are already potentially dead, they're ghostly, and they're haunting her, and then there'll be a singular character that is not yet been afflicted by this. And yeah, that was really exciting to think through the breakdown of what can I show to show these different stages that these fairies are in, and what level of cursedness they're at, or whether they're healthy or alive. And I love thinking through the details that I can put in that tell a story like this. So for this piece, I knew that I wanted her to have really relatively dark eyes, kind of vacant, where there are no pupils or irises, so that she has more of a ghostly, withdrawn kind of a look. And I also wanted to include a bite mark, so that it was, again, like she was poisoned from an external source, and this was slowly changing her. So she has a bite mark on her thigh, and then outward, eventually I add these like little threads of poison that follow up through her veins from that, and from her eyes and her mouth. And those were little details that I loved thinking through from the sketch phase, to make sure that it does push that haunted look a little bit more. It tells more of a story for how this character is actually feeling. And painting the background for this piece was probably my favorite. I love working on these really hazy, rainy looking skies, and that is definitely something that will be carried through to the other works that I do within this, so that it feels like they're all happening around the same time. That's something that can give it a little bit more of a world presence, even though it's a very small amount of information that's actually here in this piece, where it's just this hazy, rainy looking wash with some clouds painted eventually. It definitely helps place the fairy within an atmosphere and a world. And by carrying that over to the other pieces, it grounds all of them together, so that it does feel like they are happening within the same time, the same place, or at least similar times and places. And whenever I have elements like this that I specifically want to have basically as identical as I can in different pieces, I make sure to take note what paints I'm actually mixing together to achieve this look. So if it's slightly mixed differently, it's totally okay. I'm happy with that. It gives it a little bit of variety. But if the base pigments that are mixed together are the same, then it'll still feel very unifying and connected. And again, the main paint that I used for this background was Payne's Gray, but I used a little bit of Moon Glow from Daniel Smith to add just a little bit of granulation and variety to the pigments that are happening within the background. But the details for the characters, that is something that I'm really excited to explore, because like I mentioned, there are going to be 3 variations of fairies within the 2 pieces that I'll be painting. So this one, she has blue skin and she is kind of declining. And in the next piece that I'll be working on, there will be ghost fairies and alive fairies. So I want to play with the temperature of the skin color for those, so that it pushes that narrative a little bit more. I'm not sure exactly how I want to paint the ghost yet, but the living fairy, I definitely want her skin color to be a lot warmer, like she's actually closer to being alive, or actually is alive. But the ghost ones, I might lean more being more desaturated potentially, so that it's more like a gray skin color and transparent is my first initial idea for that. But that's something that I can explore a little bit more with some color comps and testing out how I actually want to execute that with different paints. But that's my initial thought, is that going from a warmer, slightly more natural skin color to blue, and then to a gray color. And yeah, I think that'll help tell the story, tell the narrative that I'm looking for. And I can also push the details more. So like the details that I've established within this piece, I can make them even more severe and intense for the ghost characters in the next piece so that it looks like they're farther along within the timeline. And I was a little bit more on top of using graded washes in this piece than I have been for a while now. And those are just basically gradients within your watercolor wash. But I realized that I haven't really been using them nearly as much as I would like to. I love how they look with watercolors. That's one of the really beautiful features of watercolors is you can create these very beautiful gradient effects. So I tried to incorporate that a little bit more in a few different areas, from her hair, how it radiates out from her, and it starts off a little bit greener closer to her, and it gets bluer when it's farther in the background or closer to the edges and areas. And I also tried to use it a little bit more within her legs so that there was a little bit more of a delineation from the top of her thigh to her feet so that it created a little bit more movement. So that is something that I definitely want to carry over to the next pieces. I want to be sure that I'm using these graded washes so that there's that connection there, and also so that I can get a little bit more practice with them again. Somehow they just kind of fell off my radar, and they're such an important component to really just using all of my tools with watercolors. And don't forget, I do have this print as the exclusive postcard for March that'll be shipped out in April, and that's the only way to get this as a print. So if you'd like to get this as a print, then go and check out my Patreon. There's a link down in the description that'll take you over there, and you just have to be signed up for the $10 tier or up by March 31st. And I do have the original painting available at my shop, so if you'd like to own this little original, there is a link to my shop down in the description as well. And of course, I want to give a huge thank you to all of my patrons over on Patreon. You guys, I can't thank you enough. I always say that every time, but seriously, I deeply appreciate all the support that you show me over there. But that is it for today, so thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.